According to the 2022 Data Breach Investigations Report, the human remains the number one driver of breaches today, demonstrating that cybersecurity is no longer just a technical challenge, but a human one as well. But how do you manage the human risks of cybersecurity? It starts with measurement. Only by effectively quantifying human risk can organizations engage employees with relevant activities to truly change human behavior. That's human risk management. Map key human behaviors to the business risks that matter most to your organization for free by visiting securityweekly.com/living security.
Hi folks, I'm Adrian Sanabria, the host of Enterprise Security Weekly. Every week, we interview the most interesting folks we can find talking about the most pressing cybersecurity issues and challenges facing the enterprise today. Myself and my co-hosts have each been in the industry for decades, long enough to see the patterns in the industry and explore where trends are going. In addition to enterprise challenges, we also follow the vendor space, the most interesting security startups emerging, technology and product trends, all the most interesting funding and acquisition announcements. Finally, we love to discuss the latest trends in tech and how they'll impact cybersecurity. If you're wondering how the latest in AI, quantum computing, cloud, and DevOps is going to impact security a few years down the road, you should follow the Enterprise Security Weekly podcast.
Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. We are going to cover the news. Maybe I should actually say welcome back to Business AI Security Weekly. I don't know. This week's articles are definitely very AI heavy, as you've seen in most of the news segments this week. We're going to cover a bunch of business-related articles around AI and kind of dive in. So let's just dive right in. SEC is asking for comments on cybersecurity. This is actually a good thing, I think, the fact that they've taken some time and we're getting a bunch of commentary, but that really only matters if people contribute this. So I'm not sure if either of you have read through some of the SEC recommendations and what's coming down the pipe and or offered any contributions, but I can tell you I definitely have not in the last month. But this is going to be open to the public and very very relevant to many of us, especially if you work in a publicly traded company.
Yeah, and that's this Wednesday. That's in 2 days at 10 a.m. You can actually put your comments in about cybersecurity and the cybersecurity regulations that the SEC is proposing. So it's a rare open forum ability to say, hey, you guys are doing amazing, or you suck, and here's why. Speak your mind.
Yeah, I'm curious from even some of the things that have come down the pipe with the CISO role and all of the things that we've been looking at for mandatory reporting. All of those things I think should be at least evaluated and or covered from this standpoint. So I think there's an opportunity there for commentary on amendments to the current advisories that are happening, which are very old if no one knows that. Our next article. Oh, go ahead. Yeah, Ben. I was waiting for Ben to weigh in on this.
Yeah. So you guys were were commenting there, so I was kind of waiting. Look, I think we're all looking to see what these proposed rules come out like, right? And from a CISO perspective, when you think about the guidelines and the requirements and the reporting timelines, having cyber experience on the board, I think all these things are things it just surprises me that the industry hasn't gotten behind a little more on its own, right? It just seems like we're letting one of the biggest, if not the biggest risk to most enterprise organizations go by in a somewhat unmanaged, unfunded way, right? And I know there are a lot of businesses out there going to say we're pumping a lot of money into it. But I think, when you really ask, like, how much effort are you putting into it? And does that align with the actual risk that you're seeing? I don't think they're commensurate. I think there's a delta there and a gap, and why the SEC is starting to do this. And I think if you're investing in a company, and from a responsibility to your investment perspective, if that investment isn't being protected, if the company isn't taking the steps necessary to look at those risks in the right way, you really have to question as an investor: are you doing the right thing? But how do you get that perspective? And I can tell you, with regard to the companies that I've seen, it isn't in the annual reports. I mean, you're not getting a true perspective on the amount of risk that those companies are taking on. So I really look forward to some of this, and I hope it changes some of the landscape. And I know some peers and colleagues that I've talked to have equated it some to the SEC guidelines for financial disclosures, and 20, 25 years ago, not having to have somebody on the board that actually could read a balance sheet, right? So this is I think just long overdue, and something that we're going to have to see how it manifests. I'm just hoping people are actually putting in relevant comments to actually get the right guidance in there where we see something that's meaningful. So sorry, that was long-winded, but that's my perspective.
No. It was not long-winded at all. It was beautiful, because I agree with you. We've waited so long to have a mandate that somebody on the board actually has cybersecurity knowledge. We've waited so long for a mandate that says that the risks have to be detailed out. Every day a board and a C-suite make choices on risks, right? As security professionals, our job is to give the options to the C-suite or the board. Hey, you can do this, or you can do this. This has a low risk, this has a high risk. That's our job. I mean, am I wrong? And
no,
how long have we waited?
You're 100% right on that. Yeah.
And so how long have we waited for those risks, those choices to be detailed out, so we can actually assess the performance of the C-suite and board in making choices that that align with, as investors, that align with our views? If we think that they should be making high-risk choices to maximize profits, that's great. Find the companies that are doing that. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying that's your choice. If that's your philosophy, find a company that aligns with your philosophy. If you want companies that are being a little more conservative in their choices, maybe spending a little bit more on security to make sure that Tyler can't get in. I'm always blaming Tyler. It's just my thing. So, and you want to make sure that they're spending that money in ways that you deem appropriate. Like, I like this. They're doing proper identity. They're doing proper firewalling, proper zero trust. They're spending the money to make sure that they don't get screwed from ransomware or this or that or the other thing. Then, hey, why don't we just align our investments, our dollars? We vote with our dollars. I've heard that all my life. Vote with your dollar. Align your money, your investments, with companies that are spending that money. And if the SEC can put together, a report card of how companies are doing that way, I think that's fantastic.
But when and where are they getting the advice prior to the meetings in order to look at the adoption of these amendments, or look at the considerations that are being? Are we evaluating this based on compliance?
The guidelines?
Yeah.
You mean the guidelines, or do you mean the companies? Where are you asking?
The guidelines. I mean, the guidelines obviously are going to drive the companies. And prior to this, I mean, this is not an open forum, right? It's a webcast. You're going to watch what they want to say and the agenda that they have outlined. So prior to this, like, how much input and who's doing the input and what framework are we using for those inputs? Like, those are the pieces
that they published kind of
go behind the curtains.
They published the proposed rules, right? So they published the rules that they're trying to get out there and they think are going to be the final rules that they implement. And that's what the comment period is on, is for people to read those rules and then comment back on them and say, we think you're going far enough. We don't think you're going far enough. I know a lot of people have kind of railed at, maybe having somebody with cyber experience on the board, but it strikes me as extremely odd that isn't just something that a company's adopted with the amount of risk they're taking on, which I've been very vocal about. But yeah, I mean, they're putting this out there. I think that to the point that I think Josh was making, this isn't going to be a scorecard, right? But I do think there needs to be some type of transparency in that companies are forced to have somebody who has the knowledge to make some input and say, yes, we're spending enough on this risk, right? Or to Josh's point, I think it's a very valid one. CISOs have always been this, we're the no guys. We just say no and we don't do stuff, or we don't like to do stuff. And I don't think that's necessarily the case for most of the people that I know and colleagues in the industry that I associate with. I think what we try to do is put, if we're given enough data on the front side, we try to put good choices in front of executive staff and the board and say, given what I know, I think this is super risky and I wouldn't recommend doing it. I'm not saying you can't do it. I wouldn't recommend it. Or, given what I know, we're doing enough in this area, and I think we're putting enough, and I think we're okay to make this business decision, right? Then it's ultimately up to executive staff and the board, at some reason with oversight, to say, yeah, we're doing enough here. And I think the reporting has to be saying, from a transparency side, we are taking an extremely risky position. We are not risk averse, and we are going forward with this risk. Or we are not, we are extremely risk averse, and we're going to take a very conservative opinion, and we're putting money into this, and that's part where the investment's going, but we're buying down the risk in this area. And given that, that's where the investors have to make the decision and say, yeah, I like investing in this company because they're risk averse and it matches my risk tolerance, right? Like it's any other decision you're making in your life. Like, how risky do you want to be with this? And if as an investor you're putting money in a publicly traded company, you should know whether there's a lot of risk behind, is that company going to have a public exposure? And as the result, stock price takes a 30% hit, right? That's something you should know as an investor. And I think as a well-run publicly traded company, there should be some guidance on that's more transparent than what I'm seeing right now in the reports that companies are filing in their annual reports.
I could not agree more. I don't know. I could not agree more. You're literally talking about this is going to align security with the business to such a degree because it's going to align the cybersecurity philosophy with the business philosophy. If it's a blue chip company, they're going to be blue chip cybersecurity. If it's a startup with a burn rate of, oh my God, it's on fire, it's all on fire, they're going to be risky on their cybersecurity as well. And this aligns the investment with the same thing. This just makes sense.
And 90% of the investors aren't going to be educated. Probably higher than that. Probably 99% aren't going to be educated. But they should be able to look at a risk statement, right? Where do we fall on that risk side and make that decision? But some of that data should go to that 1% that then at the company meeting, at the annual meeting, can raise a question and ask, hey, I see you're only investing X percent of revenue in cyber protections, but this seems to be the top risk on your annual report. Why are you not investing more? Why have you not taken these precautions? Why did we see 3 exploits against you last year? Like, the number of exploits you have and the severity and the impact of business should be something that we talk about more transparently in an annual report, right? And I don't think any CISOs are scared of that. I think what they're scared of is not getting the support from the executive staff and the board for that, right? And almost being told to quiet down. Right. And that's been the big problem in the industry is we're not heard.
I know this is only one article out of several we've got, but I think that this is big. This is actually very big. And the SEC is one of the few groups that has the clout, the regulatory clout to pull this off. To actually say, no. You've got to make it public. You got a breach, it's got to be public. You got a problem, it's got to be public. You've got a philosophy, it's got to be public. And that kind of thought process or philosophy is huge. I would really, really, really like to see I would really like to see that be part of their it's not their 10Ks, their annual report, what their philosophy on risk on cybersecurity is.
Yeah. And to play devil's advocate just a little bit on this, which you guys may have some thoughts on. I'd be interested to see where you feel about it. I do think there are some things that we have to be careful about in these regulations, right? With any regulation comes the potential for really screwing things up. And one of those areas is things like breach notification periods, right? So there are jurisdictions in the world, if you've dealt with global companies, where you're under a 24, a 48, a 72-hour notification period. And that does cause concern for CISOs, right? And so the way that that's written and how the breach reporting, just as an example of one of many things that could get screwed up here, like, it has to be once you know that a breach has actually happened, right? It can't be that the 24-hour clock starts as soon as the incident potentially happened, and then we don't even find out about it because for whatever reason we don't have intelligence about the event until potentially right at that period or even after that period. So there has to be very well thought out work in the legislation and the regulations and how it's applied. And I think that's why it's key for people to get in on this and actually put your comments and thoughts into it. And hopefully it'll be taken seriously, right? And we'll listen to people in the industry that actually understand this, and it won't be just regulation by regulators. It'll be regulation by, with thoughtful input from industry experts.
Yeah, SEC is one of the few places, just like cyber insurance, right, that you can affect major change very quickly in an industry. But like you said, that can lead to a lot of very bad things, especially around the breach stuff. We talk about ongoing incidents and intelligence being gathered, and or maybe there's ongoing operations against different actors that are doing particular things. You've got everything from having to notify on a breach that was done maliciously at a very specific time when boards and numbers are coming out for stockholders or shareholders. Like, there's a lot of moving parts and pieces that people don't consider. Right? Yeah.
I mean, this could be malicious in intent. And who's the actor? Is it a hacktivist? Is it a nation state? Is it internal employee? Like, that is going to dictate a lot of how you respond and the timelines around stuff, right? I mean, there's just so many details here. It's really hard. So I hope this is just. I hope the end result of these rules is well thought out and applied.
We'll see some of that in 2 days.
Somebody comes up with that report card. We'll see. I really hope somebody comes up with that report card. But speaking of report cards and news and how it comes out, Google's now meddling with AI in the newsroom.
Oh, what could go wrong?
Yeah, that's going to be fine. That's going to be fine. No bias there, I'm sure, in the model.
Yeah.
I think that the only thing, for whatever reason, the only thing I can think of when I think of Google or AI in the newsroom is Sharknado. Like, it's just going to be this whirling, twirling doom zone. It's going to be horrifying. And the scary thing is that the actors and writers strike is partially or significantly about AI, and Google with AI in the newsroom. I think we're going to see a writer's strike as well in the print media, and I think it's going to be fascinating to see what happens over the next few years.
And I thought
the lead sentence to that was Google has a new plan to help save journalism. I don't think anything could be really farther from the truth there, right? Like, people don't trust journalism to a large extent, at least the circles that I operate in. Like, I haven't heard of a lot of people saying, hey, we really trust every news article we get. It's not the days of Walter Cronkite anymore, and the feeling that it was just news. It's a lot of opinion, and I think this is even going to go farther down that rat hole. I hate to see where this is going to go, and the potential for people just trusting the output of AI without consideration for the model or the data that was fed into it to come out with that output.
Yeah, not to mention that
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, not to mention like the human aspect that's missing there from like a gut check, a network and contacts development, the backstory, vetting, all of the pieces, the investigative journalism, all the pieces that make real good journalism happen, that is actually the stuff that is trustworthy and or being disclosed. You have to take it all with a grain of salt now, because let's be real, news is now a verb for opinion, like you said. So, but all of the pieces that made it at least where you could glean fact from the data being presented, now we have to question even the data being presented, because the data itself is coming out of other data. And that, as we can see this week and last week all around, how ChatGPT-4 has gotten some stuff very, very wrong and has started to degrade for a little bit. So we really have to be careful what this means, and if we lose that lost art and skill of tradesmanship that journalism has been, that's a big deal for everybody.
Yeah, if we lose the ability to communicate in a mass fashion, and also, by the way, let's be clear. There's two things about this that I think are hilarious. One is, how bad is the data going to be? How much bias is it going to have, either as it invokes, or down the road once it ingests 14 gazillion news stories and gets biased to whatever spin that those news stories make it. But then the second thing is, how is the system going to recognize a parody news story? How many pranks and parodies are out there? And do you think the system's going to recognize
the human element is gone, right? I even take that further, Josh. Like, the feeling that, maybe I shouldn't go down this road because it just feels wrong to me. I'm not going to report on this in that way because it feels like I'm doing the wrong thing, where the feeling and the empathy and the human element of that will be completely gone. And then, you ratchet that up even further. I think people talk about the weaponization of AI. I think this could be a very devious path for the weaponization of AI, in the sense that AI could generate stories with such efficiency and speed that humans trying to counteract the negative or the wrong or the malicious won't be able to compete in that cycle, right? You wouldn't find out for much later than the amount of stories that got out to lead the population in a certain direction. So I just see this as, I don't know. I'm a big believer in AI, but I think we've got to be, with great power comes great responsibility. we have to be very careful about the application.
I'm also going to point out
we've already seen a proliferation of this, right? Like this has already happened with social media and bots and the ability to sway different demographics and the news coming to them, or highlighting and pushing people to particular news outlets of certain opinion in order to sway and move 2016 votes. We've seen it. Russia's very good at this. China's gotten very good, and we've seen this happen. But now you're talking about leveraging this for news outlets, where we're not just pushing people to news and opinion, we're actually creating the news and opinion. And there are already nation states leveraging this and doing this very well. So as soon as you started to see ChatGPT's API open up and start getting hammered, you do a search, look for a tutorial on some obscure thing you want to do. There's 8 different pages that are SEO number 1, 2, and 3 that are ChatGPT generated and say the exact same things. And then, there's 100 articles that say the same things as the other 4 pages below. They've messed up all the SEO on top of that. So we've really got multiple issues with just, I think Google's going to end up shooting themselves in the foot with their SEO and ad campaign and the ability to do viable searches and get revenue out of those, because this is going to proliferate the internet. And we're not going to be able to find good information on anything anymore. We're going to have to start over. It's kind of funny. They named this the Genesis, right? So we're starting from the beginning.
If the source material, if you're looking at Google, I think that's a great point, right? If you're trying to do a Google search and the data you're like, I know this isn't right. It doesn't feel right. Then you're going to go look for a different search engine, right? There's just so many things that are fraught with potential problems here. I have a lot of concerns.
It's kind of like watching a train wreck. You just keep watching it and you keep saying it's going to be bad, but it hasn't happened, but it is inevitably crashing as we're watching it, and it's terrifying. Just don't know how bad it's going to get.
So Sergey's back. Is he going to fix it now that he's back at Google and he's working on AI?
No.
It's really funny. I want to talk about this in a business sense for a minute. The Google still gets 80% of their revenue from search, from AdWords, right? Yeah. And so ChatGPT, they literally issued a code red, which is not the thing from A Few Good Men. In this case, a code red is...
You can't handle the truth.
Well, you can't handle the search. Okay, good point. They issued a code red, which is, this is dangerous to our core business, and it is. So now Google is trying a dozen different things, and one of the best that they've done is their security system, Google Chronicle, now integrated with Mandiant and Vertex AI, which is that name for that version of their AI. So you can ask questions about it. And Tyler, I don't know if you've seen that yet, but it's really cool. It's actually really nice, and it saves an analyst from paging through 70 different tabs on the browser. They just ask a question, all the information they need, it's right there. It really does make an analyst more efficient. So kudos to them for coming up with a really good reason and way to use AI. That's awesome. Okay. But they've got to do more. So they're really, really trying to bring, I think they have 20 different projects for AI right now in the works.
It is also terrifying the speed at which we're building these different models and different AI. This is one thing I almost went and worked at a startup, a stealth startup, to test from an offensive standpoint the ability to taint, different models, do different offensive attacks against AI and AI technologies. And as fast as we're pumping all this out, I can tell you the level of security testing that's happening against these is not proportionate to the technology that's happening, or the speed at which technology is happening.
The iteration is happening too quickly. right? I mean,
It is.
it goes back to the model, right? Like, how are you testing the model when, I mean, you're iterating on a whole generation before you could even test the model to find out if the model is accurate? It's shocking, right?
Yep. It is. It is kind of what we predicted, and looking back, like we were saying, like we really need to find good uses for AI and use cases that make sense and not use AI everywhere. And what we've seen was basically the exact opposite. Let's get everybody AI, build a massive model out of the gate, and let's use AI everywhere and see what happens. Like that was one option, but we did say that was probably not the best use case and probably will end up with the most problems. And here we are looking at, a lot of very dangerous and catastrophic issues that could come down the pipe if not reined in to an extent. And we're not even talking about 3 to 5 years from now when we have all the fallout from security holes and or integration into everything. And now, what happens when all these integrations interconnect so that they can all use different models and populate data between each other, and you got to be, interoperable between your AI. What happens on the security side? Because we didn't think about that right now. There's some things that long term we're going to be dealing with for a substantial amount of time, I think. But you can't stop, because as a company from a business standpoint, right, like you're falling behind if you are not doing the AI thing and doing it faster than your competitor. Whether or not you're doing it responsibly, like that's outside the business. You've got to maintain and look like you're moving forward, even though we're all saying we should all probably stop and maybe think about this. But if we do stop, then we're behind. So we shouldn't actually stop from a business standpoint. Like it all is just going to be catastrophic, I think. No one's going to stop, which is probably why we should just find good ways to begin thinking about getting ahead of some of the security aspects of this and or the use cases that like this like the journalism one. Like we're really going to have to find ways of vetting people, being able to collaborate and corroborate information and understand what the truth and facts really are. I think there's going to have to be a reckoning there, and at some point someone will have to come up with something different. So innovation should happen.
Yeah, I think just trying to figure out what the security risks are of AI, just to identify them, right? So then you could go off and look at it, and you can't protect what you don't know about, right? How many companies would publish their source code online? Probably not a lot, right? If you're open source, I guess yes. But if you've got custom developed code that's a trade secret, you're not going to publish it online. I mean, that's one of the core secrets we try to protect. But then, how many companies are pushing their source code into an AI model to ask it questions or get insight, not realizing that the terms of that agreement mean that code is now forever part of the model and accessible by anybody who accesses the model? Like that's the challenge here. I mean, they're not willing to take the time to actually look at what the risks are that they're accepting.
Which kind of leads into the next article, right? Yeah, like does your state have rules about using AI in hiring? Like this whole article just it's needed to be said, but it's also very dumb. Like we don't even understand what is using AI anymore. Like from a back-end database perspective, your SaaS applications, like even running a picture reverse image search. Like when we say AI, are we talking about a machine learning? Are we talking about, an actual model? Are we talking about Chat GPT? Like what are we talking about? Because I can guarantee even some of those older systems are using some machine learning in order to identify faces. So if we're going to put legislation that says we can't do that, you're going to be breaking quite a few rules, even using most of the common software out there. So I don't think this is the exact right way to do this.
Putting that data in the model, not knowing how it's interconnected, and realizing that you've broken a bunch of privacy laws globally, right?
Yeah.
It's problematic.
I mean, two things for me. One, the HR filter was bad enough before AI got in the picture. Okay. How many times did people that we know apply for jobs and get, you're not fit for this job. Why not? You don't have 7 years in this framework. The framework was invented 3 years ago. How could I have 7 years? Okay. There's a famous meme about the guy that was rejected from a job for not having 4 years as a developer using this framework. And he goes, I'm really sorry. I only invented it 2 years ago. And that's a true story. I forget the years, but you get the idea. And he And that's one thing. So the HR filter is horrible in cybersecurity, which is one reason why Lori, who we talked to on the first segment, her cyber.org organization is so needed. Because to get in this job, you need to have these things so you pass the HR filter. Imagine how bad it'll be with AI. Secondly, when you have AI doing this, how much on an application? Typically, you've got name, address, telephone number, snail mail, email, could have social security number on a lot of these things, driver's license number, your I-9 has your driver's license and your passport and social security card or whatever. There's a lot of PII on job applications. Okay, so you've got to be able to make sure that it's not in a training data set for an AI, Ben, which is exactly what you were talking about.
I mean, you upload that to Salesforce or even Microsoft. You put that in Teams and put that into your HR folder. You've got a scan of a driver's license. Guess what? Back-end search engines are reviewing that, categorizing, indexing it, and probably using some form of AI to do a lot of that work. So I think legislation around this, well, good intentioned, also needs to be much more well thought out, just like the SEC thing. Like, this should probably be designed over time and really taken seriously, rather than just dump it out and put legislation in and then try and amend it and fix it as we go, because that never works out well.
You know, and it's interesting because switching to the next article about blue collar AI, and I realize, I apologize, I sort of stacked the deck with AI this week. It's been a thing I've been doing a lot of work on recently. But blue collar AI is a legitimate thing. Did you feel like HR people? They may have college degrees in HR, HRIS, or whatever. But do you think they have a degree on AI? Do you think they understand the math or the bias in the data? Do you think they're data analytics specialists or big data specialists? The answer is no. So they're going to be using the system, not engineering the system. Okay? And the problem is that right now, when it is not a mature system, a mature science, a mature even art, how do they know when it goes wrong? There's not enough blinky lights, if that makes sense, and you're old like me, to show them what's gone wrong. This is not mature enough. This is still, let's be honest, every AI system that's out there is still effectively hobbyist, okay? Maybe prosumer grade, but they're not done to the point where the safety engineering, the limit switches are all there. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, like even a security professional that's messed with models, built models, like the higher math of how the models actually work, you basically have to be a mathematician and data scientist that specializes in a certain type of math to get and understand some of that. And that takes many years, and it is not very easy, and it wasn't very well promoted. We'll say there's not a ton of people in there. So now we have this huge gap of trained people, which is super, super small, and people that maybe are not trained but are, AI professionals because of lack of a better term. There's no one else to do it. They're the ones that know the most out of everyone else. And you're seeing this even pop up on like standard social media. You'll have like prompts. They're not prompt engineers. They're social media marketers that want to have their article and everything promoted up. And so they write all these prompts, not telling anybody kind of the dangers of the output of bias and the output of different information you're putting into these prompts. We've set ourselves up for this because of how fast this happened, but we also need to kind of corner the market a little bit, and this blue collar thing, like get some people short circuited to where we at least have a stopgap in diversity for understanding some of AI. And having colleges or community college or apprenticeships, like whatever it takes to get people to understand the risks and or how this stuff actually works at a high level, so that we can begin to get the next generation of maybe some mathematicians and maybe some model engineers and prompt engineers that get the full scope of this, not even including the security side of this, just so that we have an ongoing community that supports all of the stuff that we are pushing into. Everybody thinks there's an AI expert because they can get some good output from ChatGPT. That's really not how this is going to play out. And again, we're going to end up in a pickle long term if we don't begin to build these blue collar AI jobs for people in college to come out of.
It's going to be interesting. And mind you, I don't agree with the author about some of these AI blue collar jobs. Some of them I totally get. Like if you have 20 excavators that are all being run by AI, and you're the one person that's okay, you do this, that are assigning them to their tasks, that's a blue collar AI job. So managing and running the machinery or managing and running the systems, got it. It's an operations task. It's not an engineering task. She is saying that there's things like ML ops, so machine learning operations. So developing, deploying, and monitoring machine learning models, which I disagree with. That's an engineering job, in my opinion, not an operations job, if that makes sense. But
I mean,
on the other hand,
even on top of that, you have like infrastructure to manage, and that's very, very different from operations and managing AI to the infrastructure the AI runs on to the ongoing maintenance of the machine learning or models that you're using or continued pipeline for training. That's almost a DevSecOps pipeline problem that hasn't even been addressed yet.
Exactly. And the fallout of where does a job become a blue collar, a certification, a degree, an engineering, an operations, an administration. These jobs are going to be, look, 40 years ago, if you were an operator on a computer, you were making buku bucks. You were making serious money. Nowadays, that is a blue collar job typically. Okay, it's just, that's fine. You're a systems administrator. You're making 40, 50, 60. That's a blue collar to middle class gig, and you're fine. But it's not the $100,000 a year it used to be. It's not the acolyte to the machine god it was back in the 60s and 70s. Okay, right, Ben?
Yeah, look, I guess my question is like, what's the definition of blue collar and white collar, right? Like, I always looked at it as blue collar as kind of a trade, or you didn't go to college, you're working with your hands, right? And I don't know if that's the same thing it is now. I mean, I think yeah, some of this stuff I think you're gonna still have to go to school for, and it's not just going to be being a prompt engineer. I think there's going to be several years of a prompt engineer is actually getting paid pretty decent money. Like it will probably transition 20 years from now, but like right now, I just don't think that's the case. I think people are going to try to figure out how to actually get the most out of AI in this. So, yeah, I questioned a lot of these, a lot of the roles and where they came from. An AI architect. I mean, I don't think about an architect as a blue collar job. I'm not sure where this was going with this. When I first started the reading, I thought we were going to be talking about the replacement of blue collar workers in McDonald's to take my order. That's where I anticipated this article to go, and it went in a much different direction. I think
Ben,
that's the bigger problem.
Don't give people ideas.
Look, it's already happening, right? I think it's outside of Fort Worth. It's the first McDonald's that's fully automated, right? No people. When you think about just careers and jobs where we had this article where we talked about journalism, like it's conceivable, like you could ask AI, pump out one article a month on this continuum stream for the next year, and you're going to get one article a month and it could be published. Like it's not a great look for how we're treating all of our fellow humans. I just wonder where this is going to go. I mean, it's not going to be an overnight thing, but I think businesses are certainly trying to figure out how to lower their cost bases and try to figure out how to outsource human work to AI. And
it's making us.
There are going to be some areas where it's not going to be great. Oh, it's. I mean, if you haven't seen the movie WALL-E, you should watch the movie WALL-E. Because if in 150 years we're all in a spaceship riding around in chairs that levitate and nobody weighs under 385 pounds, like that is not going to necessarily surprise me.
We're getting close already. Like this is definitely making us lazy. It's making our brains lazy is what it is. Like that continuous need to exercise our brains in order to become innovative, to be creative, to spontaneously try and have to grind to do something that is meaningful to not just us but to humanity. That is kind of where we're moving away from when we're allowing a computer to handle that, and which allows us to be selfish and not have to worry about doing anything other than what we want to do, which doesn't really contribute to the planet and doesn't contribute to humanity and our ongoing efforts to become better humans overall. I think all of those things, there's good uses for AI, and there's the time where we're now getting lazy and need to sharpen our mindset and get back to the creative innovation that we're all designed to do much more efficiently than computers. So
I think that's really important. Like, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead,
Ted. You're wrapping up. Now, I was just going to say that I think, that ability to exercise your brain, like we have to figure out how to keep focus on that, right? We can't have something doing it all for us. Otherwise, we are going to wither, right? Intellectually as a species. I saw an interesting article the other day about a person's theory on, if you go back and you look at fossil record and you look at teeth in human ancestors, they don't have problems with molars. They don't have problems with crowded teeth. They all have a pretty decent jaw, right, and a full set of teeth that's developed. And it was an interesting conjecture that the change and the move to processed food has required less work in the jaw, and so as a species, like, we're not needing that mouth space anymore, and so it's shrank. I don't know if there's any truth to that or not. I haven't investigated it fully, but there's a corollary to be made. If we're not exercising our brains and we're just allowing things to do stuff for us, I think we're going to find ourselves in a very odd position down the road where we the mental capacity may not be there anymore.
No, that is spot on, and I think all of our audience agrees at this point. So everyone should stay sharp, keep your brain. Don't let ChatGPT replace you, because it's not as good as your brain or innovation or creative abilities. So with that, we are done, and I appreciate everyone's time. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Josh. And until next week.